This video describes how to create a service in the Barracuda Web Application Firewall, or WAF. The Barracuda WAF is a web application firewall that protects web, mobile, and API-based applications in Layer 7, preventing hackers from defacing, stealing information from, or breaking into your network through your web, mobile, or API-based applications. Ideally, the Barracuda WAF is deployed behind a firewall, like the Barracuda Next-Gen firewall shown here, to provide you with the best security. To protect your first web application, you first need to create a service. Services are the building blocks of how you protect an application using the Barracuda Web Application Firewall. Services receive the incoming HTTP or HTTPS traffic. Each service has a security policy associated with it. The security policy contains various settings that are used to identify and block attacks in any incoming requests. The service also receives responses from the servers and applies security such as data theft protection before returning responses to the client. Using services, the Barracuda Web Application Firewall acts as a server that clients connect to on the front end. On the back end, the service acts as a client to the real servers. Let's begin. Log into your Barracuda Web Application Firewall and go to Basic Services. There are several different types of services you can create. Here, we're going to focus on the top 3 in the list. Be aware that there are others, like the FTP, FTP SSL, if you need them. An HTTP service is a controlled entry point for an unencrypted HTTP web application on the server. An HTTPS service is a controlled entry point for an encrypted HTTPS web application on the server. HTTPS services require that you have an SSL TLS certificate. An instant SSL type service enables you to put a secure HTTPS front end onto an HTTP application. This is also called SSL offloading. If you have an older application that you can't convert to handle HTTPS, but you need to provide a secure front end, then create an instant SSL service to secure your app transport. The instant SSL service also requires an SSL TLS certificate. In this video, we'll create each of these 3 service types. Let's start by creating an HTTP service. Give the service a name. Select HTTP. Specify the virtual IP address people will use to access your application. HTTP services listen on port 80. Enter the IP address for the application server or real server. This is the server that hosts your web application. For this video, we'll be using BadStore, a demonstration site for web security. I'll enter the IP address for our BadStore server. If you have multiple servers, you can add them after creating the service. The Barracuda Web Application Firewall will act as a load balancer for these servers. If you choose, you can create groups to organize your services. If you don't create a new group, services are created in the default group. Click Add. The new service appears in the Services table below, where you can see the basic settings for the service. The back-end server appears below the service. The green check marks show that they are active. Notice the service is operating under the default policy. Policy refers to the security policy that the service is built on. If needed, you can go to another section of the Barracuda WAF to change the policy settings specific to your web application. Note that the mode is passive. All services are in passive mode when you first create them. Passive mode logs traffic but does not block it. This way, you can see how the service is working without interfering with your web application's functioning. Let's see how the service works. Open a new browser tab and type in the IP address we specified. Make sure that you specify HTTP and not HTTPS. Notice that you are taken directly to BadStore. The WAF is serving as the front end to the BadStore server. This is transparent to the user. Back in the WAF, go to Basic Access Logs. Here, we can see that we just accessed the WAF a moment ago. As we mentioned before, the service is in passive mode. This means that access is logged, as we just saw, but potential attacks are not blocked. When you are ready to start blocking potential attacks, set the service into active mode. In the WAF, go to the Basic Services page. Edit the service, and under Basic Security Mode, select Active. Then click Save to save your change. We'll go over blocking attacks and viewing those associated logs in a different video. Now let's create an HTTPS service. The difference between HTTP and HTTPS services is HTTPS services require a certificate. If you've already added certificates to the Barracuda WAF, they'll appear in this list. If not, you can do that now. Navigate to Basic Certificates. On the Certificates page, you can see certificates you've already saved, or you can upload a certificate that you've obtained from a certificate authority. For the purposes of this video, we'll create our own self-signed certificate. For the certificate name, enter a nickname for this certificate. For the common name, use your fully qualified DNS name. We'll fill in the basic information here for our organization and click Save. Now that we've created our certificate, let's return to the Basic Services page and create the service. We'll start the same way as we did for the HTTP service. Let's give it a name and specify a virtual IP address. The system automatically knows that HTTPS services listen on port 443. Add the bad store server IP as the real server. Select this new certificate from the list, then click Add. Now the service appears in the table below. Notice that it is of type HTTPS and is passive by default. Let's see how this secure service works. Open a new browser tab and type in the virtual IP address with the HTTPS lead. You might receive a message about security here, since this is just a self-signed certificate, not from a certificate authority. For the purposes of this video, we'll continue through. You are again directed to the bad store web application, this time over a secure connection. Back in the WAF, go to Basic Access Logs. Here we can see that we just accessed the WAF a moment ago. You can see we accessed it through port 443, used for secure communications. Finally, let's create an instant SSL service. As we said before, an instant SSL service can help make an old HTTP web application more secure by adding SSL security to it. This is called SSL offloading. Creating an instant SSL service creates two services with the same IP address, a redirect service with port 80 and an HTTPS service with port 443. The redirect service is a non-SSL service that redirects all the requests to the HTTPS service. You can see in this figure that the HTTP request goes from the user to service number 1, which redirects the request to service number 2. Service number 2 communicates with the basic HTTP servers and handles their response, presenting the users with an HTTPS front end to the servers. We'll start the same way as for the previous services. Let's give this service a name and specify the virtual IP address. The system automatically knows that this service will listen on port 443 like an HTTPS service. Add bad store as the real server. We'll select the certificate again, and this time we'll add the domain of the web application, badstore.net. Click Add. Notice in the services table there are two new services, the redirect service on port 80 and the HTTPS service on port 443. An HTTP request will come in on port 80 and get handled by the redirect service, and the WAF will present an HTTPS front end. Let's see what this looks like to the user and in the access log. In a new browser tab, enter the virtual IP address using HTTP, not HTTPS. Notice that our instant SSL service changes the request to use HTTPS. Here the WAF is automatically redirecting users to an HTTPS front end in a process called SSL offloading. Again, this is especially useful if you have an application that you cannot update to provide a secure HTTPS interface. The Barracuda WAF provides a secure front end for the application. In the access log, you can see that we accessed both port 80 and port 443. When you are ready to put this service to work blocking attacks, change the mode from passive to active as we showed before. We'll show more about preventing attacks and logging attack attempts in another video. To edit a service, click the corresponding edit link for that service. To copy a service that you created, from the More Actions drop-down, select Copy. In the Copy dialog, select the name of the service object. Enter a new name for the new service. Add the IP address, port, and group, then click Save. Thanks for watching.